Hello there, and welcome to the Pint-Sized Healing Podcast. My name is Max Thompson. Let's get started. Right, so last week we said maybe you weren't so bad at boundary maintenance as you thought you were, but the abuser and their flying monkeys are just, really bad at accepting your boundaries. And so they're constantly trying to challenge you, right? Because this is the thing, this is the game, right? Every time they manage you to compromise a boundary, to compromise a little bit of yourself, that's a win to them, right? That's what they're after. And so sometimes it is easier to just put down one big boundary rather than, 100 little individual boundaries. The biggest of all big boundaries is obviously no contact, but I know and I understand that that's not always an option or something that people are willing to consider. But even, on a smaller scale, sometimes it's easier to just make your boundaries at least when you're dealing with, toxic people, quite black and white, right? It's either this or that, and there's no sort of in between, there's no wiggle room. Listen, with healthy, happy people, it is very easy to say, hey, do you know what? Even things like, do you know what? Let's just pencil it in for tomorrow. I am not entirely sure, but we'll see where we go. Because the next day I can call this person and say, do you know what? I know that we said we might meet today, but XYZ. Um, that's, you're giving people a little bit of wiggle room. Sometimes it's also about, yeah, sometimes you accept something because it's not really an issue. It's not how you prefer to do things, but are you gonna make a big deal out of it? Like, for example, maybe with your mother-in-law, I'm just random example here. Maybe your mother-in-law sometimes shows up unannounced, and sure, it's not ideal, but you know what? She usually only stays 5 minutes, and you know, um, she's just looking for a little bit of company or whatever, right? Whatever reason you have for not having a huge issue with your mother-in-law showing up every so often. And maybe it's just because when she shows up unannounced and you say, do you know what, this really isn't a good time, she says, okay, that's fine, and leaves, right? Because that, so you can set the boundary in the moment as you see appropriate. Whereas maybe your own mother showing up unannounced and completely taken over your day, regardless of whether you say it's a good time or not, coming in and criticizing you for an hour about whatever she's fancying criticizing you about today, that is a huge inconvenience to you. And so that's a boundary that you are not willing to give up, right? So you can see that with different people, you have different ways of setting your boundaries, and you have different boundaries that you want to enforce with them. Um, and so when it comes to toxic people and flying monkeys, don't forget the flying monkeys, right? Um, and for those of you who have never heard the term flying monkeys, it does refer to the Wizard of Oz thing. It's the group of people that an abuser surrounds themselves with who help, whether knowingly or not, who help perpetrate the abuse by reinforcing it or by doing some of the dirty work for the abuser. And so, there's these people are not going to respect your boundaries, and so rather than having to guard 100 little boundaries like you would with, maybe a healthy person who isn't looking for the way through, right? Then you can have 100 little boundaries, and you can just remind them sometimes of, oh, do you know what? I didn't find that very nice, so can you not do that in the future? But someone who's trying to look for the way in, put one big boundary down, right? Because it's just easier to manage. It's easier to say, I don't want you to show up unannounced, full stop, rather than, I don't mind if you do it sometimes, but I need to be able to say that I'm busy if that's the case, or that I'm tired if that's the case. Do you know where I'm coming from? It's just sometimes easier to just put the big boundary down and just, okay, so, you would be okay with it sometimes, but that's not language that abusers understand or accept. You know what I mean? So make life a little bit easier for yourself, and sometimes just choose to put down one big boundary rather than the subtle, the subtle kind of flexible boundaries that you would set with the healthy, happy people in your life. Keep the flexible boundaries for the flexible, happy, healthy people. That's just the advice that I wanted to give to you today. Next week I'll be back with one more pint-sized healing podcast on boundaries, and I hope you'll tune in. See you then. Bye.